The huge glass dome of the Galactic Council building shined under 3 different colored suns. The giant structure looked like a crystal bubble floating above the massive city below. Hundreds of flying cars moved between tall metal buildings that reached up into the purple sky. This was Nexus Prime, the most important place in the entire galaxy, where every big decision was made. Inside the main meeting room, 12 different alien species sat around a circular table that was bigger than most houses. The room was so large that it could fit a whole spaceship inside it. Floating lights moved around the ceiling like tiny stars, giving everything a soft blue glow. The air smelled like flowers mixed with metal and something else that humans would find very strange. Council Speaker Vorthak stood up slowly from his giant chair. His body was covered in dark green scales that moved and changed color when he was angry or excited. He was twice as tall as any human, and his yellow eyes could see things that most creatures could not. His long tail dragged on the floor behind him, making soft scraping sounds as he walked. Today was not like other days. The council had never called an emergency meeting this fast before. Usually they would talk for weeks or months before making any decisions. But something had happened that scared them all. The reports coming from the outer edge of the galaxy told a story that seemed impossible. The HFY Armada was gone. Not defeated, not damaged, gone completely destroyed. Every single one of their massive warships had been turned into space dust. Their biomechanical soldiers that could tear apart steel with their bare hands were floating dead in the cold darkness of space. The HFY had been the most feared military force in the galaxy for over 200 years. They had conquered 30 different star systems and enslaved billions of creatures, but now they were all dead, killed by a species that most of the council members had barely heard of before humans. The alien delegates whispered to each other in their strange languages. The Zephyrians looked like tall, thin ghosts made of moving light. They flickered and changed shape when they were nervous, which they were doing a lot right now. The mollusk people were large slug-like creatures that changed colors to talk to each other. Right now, they were flashing angry red and worried orange colors. The Threnodi looked like living crystals that made beautiful singing sounds. When they moved, they were chiming together in high-pitched notes that sounded scared. The Gorvani were huge rock-like beings that rarely moved or spoke, but even they were shifting uncomfortably in their massive stone chairs. At the far end of the room near a smaller door, a single figure waited. Ambassador Hyunwoo from Earth stood quietly by himself. He was wearing a simple black uniform that looked very plain compared to the fancy clothes and decorations worn by the other species representatives. He was not very tall and did not look strong or dangerous. He had short black hair, dark eyes, and smooth skin without any scales, spikes, or other alien features. Most of the council members stared at him with curiosity. Some had never seen a human before. Humans looked so ordinary compared to other species. They had no natural weapons, no thick armor, no special abilities that anyone could see. They breathed the same air as many other species and ate normal food. They seemed almost boring, but this boring-looking species had somehow done something that should have been impossible. They had destroyed the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Speaker Vorthak raised one of his long arms to get everyone's attention. The room became quiet, except for the soft humming of the air systems and the distant sounds of the city below. He looked directly at Hyunwoo with his bright yellow eyes. "Representative from Earth," he said in a deep voice that echoed around the room. "You may take your place." At the council table, Hyunwoo walked slowly across the huge room. His footsteps made small clicking sounds on the smooth metal floor. He did not look nervous or scared. He did not bow or show any special respect to the alien leaders. He simply walked to the chair marked with Earth symbol and sat down. The other delegates watched him carefully. Some of them had fought wars against each other in the past. Some had made peace treaties that took years to negotiate. Some had technologies that could destroy planets or create new stars. But none of them had ever completely wiped out the HFY Armada as Hyunwoo settled into his chair. The whispers started again. The delegates spoke in their own languages, but their translation devices let everyone understand. "How did they do it?" asked a Zephyrian representative whose light form was flickering rapidly. "Their ships are not that advanced," said a mollusk whose skin was turning purple with confusion. Maybe they used some kind of new weapon, suggested a Threnody whose crystal body chimed with worry. The humans have only had space travel for 50 years, said another voice. How could they have better weapons than the Kethvar? Hyunwoo sat quietly and listened to all the questions and comments flying. Around the room, he did not try to answer any of them. He did not look proud or excited about what his species had done. He just waited patiently like someone sitting in a doctor's office. The truth was that the battle reports made no sense to any. Of the alien species, the Kethvar had attacked a human colony world with their usual overwhelming force. They brought hundreds of biomechanical warships and millions of their strongest soldiers. They had done this same attack pattern successfully for 2 centuries, but the humans had been ready waiting with a fleet that was much smaller than the Kethvar force. What happened next was recorded by long-distance sensors from 3 different neutral species. The human ships had moved in ways that seemed impossible, dodging weapons that should have hit them, and appearing in places where they could not have traveled so quickly. The Kethvar bioweapons that could eat through any known metal or energy shield had simply bounced off the human ships like rain hitting a window. The human weapons had cut through Kethvar armor like it was made of paper. The entire battle had lasted less than 6 hours. When it was over, every single Kethvar ship was destroyed. Every single Kethvar soldier was dead. The human fleet had lost exactly 0 ships and 0 people. Not one human had been hurt in a battle that should have been impossible for them to win. Now this ordinary-looking human sat in the most important room in the galaxy, surrounded by species that had been making decisions about galactic politics since before humans had discovered fire. He looked calm and patient, like he was waiting for a bus instead of sitting in the center of the most powerful government in known space. Speaker Vorthak looked around the room at all the worried and confused faces of the other delegates. He could see fear in their eyes, even though most of them would never admit it. The same species that had seemed so weak and unimportant just a few weeks ago had proven they could destroy anyone who threatened them. The meeting was about to begin, and everyone knew that whatever happened next would change the galaxy forever. The question was whether the change would be good or very, very bad. Speaker Vorthak struck his staff against the metal floor 3 times. The sound echoed through the massive chamber like thunder. Each strike meant that the official council session was now beginning. All the alien delegates stopped their whispered conversations and turned their attention to the front of the room. The council has gathered today to address a matter of extreme importance. Vorthak announced. His voice was deep and powerful, filling every corner of the huge space. The destruction of the Kethvar Armada by human forces has created a crisis that threatens the stability of our galaxy. Hyunwoo remained seated calmly in his chair. His hands were folded in his lap and his face showed no emotion at all. He looked like someone waiting for a weather report instead of someone whose entire species was about to be put on trial by the most powerful government in the galaxy. Representative Korvex, from the hegemony of scales, was the first to stand up. His body looked like a giant lizard that had learned to walk on 2 legs. His skin was covered in red and gold scales that rattled when he moved. His eyes were like black holes that seemed to absorb all the light around them. The humans have committed an act of unprovoked aggression. Korvex declared. His forked tongue flicked out as he spoke, tasting the air like a snake. This attack on the Kethvar forces violates every treaty and agreement that maintains peace in our galaxy. A ripple of agreement moved through the assembled delegates. Many of them nodded their heads or made sounds of approval in their own languages. The mollusk representative turned bright green, which meant strong agreement in their color language. Several of the crystal Threnody chimed together in harmony. Ambassador Celia from the Zephyrian Collective flickered into a more solid form so she could speak clearly. Her body looked like it was made of moving starlight that constantly shifted and changed. The humans show a level of violence that we have not seen in centuries, she said. Her voice sounded like wind moving through metal tubes. The Kethvar were a recognized government with legitimate authority over their territories. They had every right to expand their influence and maintain order in the outer rim systems. What the humans did was not defense. It was murder on a massive scale. More voices joined the growing chorus of accusations. Representative Thakmar from the Gorvani Confederation rarely spoke during council meetings. His people were made of living rock, and they usually preferred to listen rather than talk. But today even he felt the need to add his voice. My people have maintained neutrality in galactic conflicts for over 800 years. Thokmar rumbled. His voice sounded like stones grinding together. But what we witnessed in the Outer Rim was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The humans used weapons and tactics that show complete disregard for civilized warfare. The accusations kept coming like waves crashing against a shore. The insectoid hives complained that human actions had disrupted trade routes that their merchant fleets had used for generations. The Aquatic Federation worried that human aggression would spread to other sectors. The Machine Collective calculated that human military capabilities posed a statistical threat to galactic stability. Through it all, Hyunwoo sat quietly and listened. His dark eyes moved from speaker to speaker, but his expression never changed. He did not take notes. He did not whisper to an aide. He did not even shift in his chair. He simply observed everything with the patience of someone who had expected exactly this reaction. The Kethvar were bringing order to chaotic systems, shouted Representative Vex from the corporate syndicate. His species looked like tall, thin insects with multiple arms and glowing compound eyes. They were civilizing worlds that had fallen into barbarism and lawlessness. The humans interfered with legitimate peacekeeping operations. Hyunwoo finally raised one hand slightly. The gesture was so small that many delegates almost missed it. But Speaker Vorthak noticed and struck his staff once against the floor. The human representative wishes to speak, Vorthak announced. The chamber fell, silent so quickly that the sudden quiet felt strange and uncomfortable. Hyunwoo stood up slowly. His movements were smooth and controlled. He was much shorter than most of the other delegates in the room, but somehow his presence seemed to fill the space around him. When he began to speak, his voice was calm and clear. "Thank you, Speaker Vorthak," he said. "I have listened carefully to the concerns raised by the distinguished members of this council. I believe there may be some misunderstanding about recent events in the Outer Rim." Several delegates made sounds of disbelief. How could there be any misunderstanding about the complete destruction of an entire military fleet? The human continued speaking as if he had not heard their reactions. The Kethvar Armada approached our colony world of New Sol with a fleet of 400 warships and 2 million soldiers. They sent no diplomatic messages. They made no attempt to negotiate or communicate their intentions. Their approach vector and formation indicated hostile intent, but they had legitimate authority in that sector. Interrupted the Zephyrian representative. Hyunwoo nodded politely. Perhaps from the council's perspective he agreed. However, our intelligence reports indicate that the Kethvar had already enslaved the populations of 17 worlds in that region. Their labor camps contained over 40 million sentient beings working under conditions that most species would consider torture. Lies hissed, Representative Korvex. The Kethvar brought order and productivity to chaotic systems. Our reconnaissance data shows differently, Hyunwoo replied calmly. The Kethvar strip mined entire planets until they were uninhabitable. They used biological weapons to make populations more compliant. They separated families and used children as leverage to ensure adult cooperation. The accusations you make are serious, said Speaker Vorthak. Do you have evidence to support these claims? Hyunwoo reached into his uniform jacket and pulled out a small device no bigger than his thumb. He placed it on the table in front of him. This contains sensor data from our scout ships, as well as testimony from refugees who escaped Kethvar-controlled worlds. The evidence has been verified by 3 independent analysis systems. The device projected a hologram into the air above the council table. The images showed devastated planets with dead oceans and poisoned atmospheres. They showed massive mining operations that had carved away entire mountain ranges. They showed crowds of alien beings in ragged clothing working in conditions that looked like something from a nightmare. But the most shocking images were of the Kethvar themselves. The council had always been told that the Kethvar were disciplined soldiers who maintained order through strength. The hologram showed something very different. Kethvar troops torturing prisoners for entertainment. Kethvar commanders deciding which children would be separated from their parents. Kethvar scientists testing biological weapons on helpless captives. The silence in the chamber was complete. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The evidence floating in the air painted a picture that was completely different from what the Council had believed for decades when our fleet arrived at New Seoul. Hyunwoo continued, his voice still calm and steady. The Kethvar immediately began preparations to bombardment the planet. They made no attempt to communicate with us or explain their presence. Their weapons were charged and their troops were ready for immediate deployment. We gave them multiple opportunities to withdraw peacefully. We broadcast warnings in 17 different languages. We offered to escort them out of our territory without conflict. They responded by launching their attack. The hologram changed to show the battle itself. The council members watched in amazement as they saw the human fleet moving with incredible speed and precision. The human ships seemed to dance between Kethvar weapons while their own attacks found their targets with perfect accuracy. The battle you see was not a massacre, Hyunwoo explained. It was the defense of innocent lives against an enemy that had already demonstrated their willingness to commit genocide, but your response was disproportionate, protested the mollusk representative, whose skin was now flashing confused yellow patterns. You destroyed their entire fleet. Every Kethvar ship that was destroyed was actively participating in an attack on a civilian population, Hyunwoo replied. We targeted only military vessels. We made no attacks on Kethvar civilian populations or non-combatant personnel. The human ambassador sat back down. His presentation was finished, but the impact of his words and the evidence he had shown would change everything. The council members looked at each other with uncertainty. Many of the accusations they had prepared now seemed hollow and wrong. The truth was more complicated than anyone had expected. The holographic evidence slowly faded from the air above the council table, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence that seemed to press down on everyone in the chamber. The alien delegates shifted in their seats and exchanged uncertain glances. The proof that Hyunwoo had shown them painted a very different picture of the Kethvar than what they had believed for decades. But Speaker Vorthak was not ready to let the humans off so easily. He had been the leader of the Galactic Council for over 30 years and had seen many species try to justify their actions with clever words and selective evidence. His yellow eyes narrowed as he looked at the calm human ambassador. Your evidence is disturbing, he admitted in his deep, rumbling voice. However, it does not change the fundamental problem that humanity has created. The Kethvar may have been harsh in their methods, but they maintained stability in the outer rim for 2 centuries. Representative Korvex, from the hegemony of scales, stood up again, his red and gold scales rattled with agitation. The humans have demonstrated military capabilities that far exceed what any single species should possess. He declared, this presents a clear threat to the balance of power that has maintained galactic peace. The other delegates began to nod in agreement. The Zephyrian representative flickered more brightly as she spoke. The humans destroyed an entire armada without losing a single ship. This level of military superiority is unprecedented and dangerous. Ambassador Zilia continued her argument. If humans can defeat the Kethvar so easily, what prevents them from attacking any other species that disagrees with their policies? They have shown that they are willing to use overwhelming force to achieve their goals. The mollusk representative changed to angry orange colors as he added his voice to the growing concerns. The humans claim they acted in defense, but their actions were clearly offensive in nature. They sought out the Kethvar fleet and destroyed it completely, leaving no survivors to tell their side of the story. Hyunwoo listened to each accusation with the same calm patience he had shown throughout the entire session. His hands remained folded in his lap, and his expression showed no sign of anger or frustration. He seemed almost bored by the heated discussions swirling around him. The Threnody crystals chimed together in worried harmonies before their representative spoke. The human military technology appears to be far in advance of anything we have encountered. This creates an imbalance that could destabilize the entire galaxy. Hours passed as the debate continued. The alien delegates worked themselves into an increasingly agitated state as they discussed the threat that humanity posed to their established order. Some spoke of humanity as if they were a plague that needed to be contained. Others compared them to the ancient destroyer races that had once terrorized the galaxy. Through it all, Speaker Vorthak watched and listened carefully. He was forming a plan that he believed would solve the human problem once and for all. The Council had dealt with difficult species before. They had methods for bringing dangerous civilizations under control. Finally, Vorthak struck his staff against the floor to restore order in the chamber. The sound echoed through the room, and gradually the heated discussions died down. All eyes turned to the tall reptilian leader as he prepared to speak. After careful consideration of all the evidence and arguments presented today, he began. The Galactic Council has reached a decision regarding the human situation. Yunwu looked up at Vorthak with mild interest, but still showed no signs of concern or worry. The Council recognizes that humanity acted with what they believe to be justifiable cause. Vorthak continued. However, the methods used and the capabilities demonstrated pose an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. Therefore, the Council offers humanity the following terms. The chamber fell completely silent as every delegate waited to hear the ultimatum that would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. First, humanity must immediately cease all military operations beyond their home system. All human warships must return to Earth space and remain there under Council supervision. Second, all human faster-than-light technology must be surrendered to the Council for study and regulation. No human vessel will be permitted to travel beyond designated routes without explicit Council approval. Third, humanity must accept permanent Council observers on all human worlds. These observers will monitor human activities and ensure compliance with galactic law. Fourth, the human military must be reduced to a size appropriate for system defense only. All weapons deemed excessive by Council standards must be destroyed under Council supervision. Fifth, all human technological research must be subject to Council review. Any innovations that could pose a threat to galactic security will be restricted or confiscated. Vorthak paused to let the weight of his words sink in before continuing. In return for accepting these terms, humanity will be granted protected status under Council law. You will be permitted to maintain your civilization on Earth and your existing colonies. Your people will be safe from external threats and your culture will be preserved. The offer was presented as generous, but everyone in the room understood what it really meant. Humanity would become a pet species kept under constant watch and control. They would lose their independence and their right to determine their own future. The alternative, Vorthak added with a slight smile that showed his sharp teeth, is that humanity will be declared a rogue species and dealt with accordingly. The Council has the military resources of 11 major civilizations at its disposal. I believe even human capabilities would be insufficient against such overwhelming numbers. The threat was clear and unmistakable. Submit to Council control or face the combined military might of the entire galaxy. It was the same ultimatum that had been given to dozens of other species over the centuries. Most had chosen to submit rather than face annihilation. Representative Korvex leaned forward in his chair, his black eyes fixed on Hyunwoo. The choice is simple, he said. Human civilization can continue to exist under Council protection, or it can be eliminated as a threat to galactic peace. The Zephyrian delegate flickered with satisfaction as she added, "This is far more generous than what other aggressive species have been offered. You should be grateful for the Council's mercy." Other delegates began to speak up, offering their own versions of the same message. Humanity was being given a chance to survive, but only if they accepted complete subjugation to alien rule. Their technology would be taken, their military would be destroyed, and their freedom would be gone forever. Hyunwoo listened to each statement with the same calm attention he had shown throughout the entire session. When the last delegate finished speaking, he remained silent for several long moments. The only sounds in the chamber were the soft humming of the air systems and the distant noise of the city below. Finally, he looked up at Speaker Vorthak and spoke in a quiet voice that somehow carried clearly through the huge room. "I will need to consult with my government before responding to your generous offer," he said. "May I request a brief recess to consider these terms?" Vorthak smiled broadly, showing all of his sharp teeth. "Of course," he replied magnanimously. "Take all the time you need to make the right decision." The alien delegates relaxed in their chairs, feeling satisfied with how the situation was being handled. They had successfully cornered humanity and forced them to choose between submission and destruction. It was exactly how these situations were supposed to be resolved. None of them noticed the slight change in Hyunwoo's expression, or the way his eyes had grown colder as he listened to their threats. The recess was granted and Hyunwoo stood up to leave the chamber. His footsteps echoed softly on the metal floor as he walked toward the exit. Behind him, the alien delegates began congratulating each other on their diplomatic success. They had no idea that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. The recess lasted exactly 1 hour. During that time, the alien delegates gathered in small groups throughout the council chamber, discussing their victory over the human problem. Most of them were pleased with how smoothly the negotiations had gone. They had expected the humans to be more difficult to handle, given their recent military success. Representative Korvex spoke quietly with several other delegates near the large windows that overlooked the city. His scales clicked together as he gestured with satisfaction. "The humans will accept our terms," he said confidently. "They have no choice but to submit to council authority." The Zephyrian ambassador flickered in agreement as she joined the conversation. Her light form pulsed with pleased colors. This outcome proves that diplomacy is still more powerful than military force. The humans may have advanced weapons, but they cannot fight the entire galaxy. Speaker Vorthak remained in his massive chair, reviewing data tablets that showed the military strength of the various council member species. Even if the humans somehow managed to defeat 2 or 3 alien fleets, they could never stand against the combined might of 11 different civilizations. The mathematics were simple and clear. The mollusk representative had turned a satisfied purple color as he discussed trade arrangements with his colleagues. Once human technology is under council control, we can distribute it among the member species in a way that maintains proper balance. Everyone will benefit from human innovations without allowing any single species to become too powerful. When the hour ended, Vorthak struck his staff 3 times to call the session back to order. The alien delegates returned to their seats with confident expressions. They expected to hear Hyunwoo accept their generous terms and submit his species to council. Oversight. Hyunwoo entered the chamber through the same door he had used before. His pace was steady and unhurried, just as it had been at the beginning of the day. His black uniform looked exactly the same and his expression remained completely neutral. He walked to his chair and remained standing behind it, rather than sitting down. "The human representative has had time to consider our offer," said Vorthak in his most diplomatic voice. "We are eager to hear your government's response to the council's generous terms." Hyunwoo looked around the chamber, making brief eye contact with each of the alien delegates. His gaze lingered for a moment on each species as if he were memorizing their faces. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and clear, just as it had been throughout the entire session. "I want to thank the distinguished members of the Galactic Council for their time and attention today," he began. "Your offer has been carefully considered by the United Earth government, and our response has been decided." The alien delegates leaned forward slightly in their chairs, expecting to hear words of acceptance and gratitude. Instead, what they heard was something that none of them had anticipated. "However, we must respectfully decline your generous offer." The silence that followed was so complete that it seemed to have physical weight. Several delegates looked confused, as if they had not heard correctly. Others stared at Hyunwoo with disbelief written across their alien features. Representative Korvex was the first to find his voice. "Surely you misunderstood the terms," he said, his scales rattling with agitation. "We are offering your species protection and a place in galactic civilization." Hyunwoo shook his head politely. "I understood the terms perfectly," he replied. "Humanity is grateful for the Council's concern, but we have decided to pursue a different path." "But you cannot refuse," protested the Zephyrian delegate, her light form flickering rapidly with shock. "The alternative is the destruction of your entire species." "I understand that as well," Hyunwoo said calmly. "We have considered all the possible consequences of our decision." Speaker Vorthak stood up from his chair, his yellow eyes blazing with anger and disbelief. "You cannot be serious," he growled. "No species has ever refused council authority and survived." Hyunwoo picked up a small bag from beside his chair and slung it over his shoulder. The gesture was so casual and ordinary that it seemed strange in the context of what was happening. He looked like someone getting ready to leave work at the end of a normal day. The United Earth government has made its position clear, he said. We appreciate the Council's offer, but we believe that freedom is more valuable than safety under the control of others. The alien delegates began talking all at once, their voices rising in a cacophony of disbelief and outrage. How could the humans be so stupid? Did they not understand what would happen to them? Did they think their military success against the Kethvar made them invincible? Through the chaos, Hyunwoo remained calm and patient. He waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. When he did, his words cut through the confusion like a knife through cloth. We understand that the Council believes it is acting for the good of galactic civilization, he said. However, our species has a different perspective on what constitutes good governance. We prefer to make our own mistakes rather than live safely under someone else's decisions. You are condemning your entire species to extinction, shouted the mollusk representative, whose skin had turned bright red with anger. Perhaps, replied Hyunwoo with a slight shrug, but that will be our choice to make. He turned away from the council table and began walking toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet chamber. Behind him, the alien delegate sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. When Hyunwoo reached the massive doors, he paused and turned back to face the assembled aliens one final time. His expression was still calm, but there was something different in his eyes now, something that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Before I leave, he said, I want to make sure there are no misunderstandings about our position. The United Earth government hereby formally withdraws from all treaties, agreements, and diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council and its member species. The words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several delegates gasped in shock, while others sat frozen in disbelief. We will be removing all human personnel from Council space and terminating all ongoing joint projects effective immediately. Hyunwoo continued, all human civilians in alien territories will be recalled to human space within the next 30 days. But why? Asked the Threnody representative, her crystal form chiming with confusion. We offered you everything you could possibly want. Hyunwoo smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, but it was not a warm or friendly expression. You offered us everything except the right to remain free, he said. He turned back toward the door and took another step before pausing once more. There is one more thing, he added without looking back. You might want to remove any of your people from human space as well. Things are going to become rather complicated very soon. The door sealed behind him with a soft hiss that seemed to echo through the chamber like a death knell. The alien delegates sat in complete silence, staring at the place where the human ambassador had been standing. After several long moments, Speaker Vorthak slowly sank back into his chair. His yellow eyes were wide with something that might have been fear. What have we done? He whispered. The first reports began arriving within hours of Hyunwoo's departure from the council chamber. At first they seemed like routine updates from various monitoring stations and diplomatic outposts scattered throughout the galaxy. But as more information poured in, the true scope of what was happening became terrifyingly clear. Commander Vex of the corporate syndicate was the first to bring disturbing news to the emergency session that Speaker Vorthak had hastily called his insect-like body was trembling as he approached the council table, clutching a datapad in two of his forearms. All human ships have disappeared from the Kepler trade route. He reported, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber lights like tiny mirrors. 73 vessels, including cargo transports, diplomatic couriers, and research ships, have simply vanished, gone. Where demanded Representative Korvex, his scales turning darker with agitation. Not destroyed, not attacked, replied Commander Vex. They conducted an orderly withdrawal. The ships filed departure papers, paid all outstanding fees, and left in formation. It was completely organized and systematic. More reports flooded in every few minutes. The pattern was the same, everywhere. Human ships were leaving. Every space station, every trade hub, every diplomatic facility throughout the galaxy. They were not fleeing in panic or rushing to escape. They were conducting what appeared to be a carefully planned evacuation. The Zephyrian delegate flickered with growing alarm as she shared her own intelligence. 47 human scientists have withdrawn from the joint research project on Altair Prime, she announced. They submitted formal resignation letters, thanked their alien colleagues for their cooperation, and departed on the next available transport. The Threnody representative chimed with worry as she added her information. All human students at the Galactic University have returned to their dormitories, packed their belongings, and requested immediate transport back to human space. The university administration says they were polite and respectful but completely determined to leave. Speaker Vorthak felt a cold sensation growing in his chest as he listened to report after report. Every human in alien space was leaving. Every human project was being terminated. Every human agreement was being dissolved. It was as if an entire species had suddenly decided to cut all ties with the rest of the galaxy. But the most disturbing reports came from the intelligence services that monitored military activities throughout the galaxy. Agent Korthak from the Council Security Division approached the table with data that made everyone in the chamber go silent. Long-range sensors have detected massive ship movements in human space. He reported human fleets are massing at strategic points along their borders, but they are not moving toward Council territory. They appear to be forming defensive positions. How many ships? Asked Vorthak, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. We estimate at least 2,000 vessels, Agent Korthak replied. But our sensors cannot penetrate deep into human space. The actual numbers could be much higher. 2,000 ships was more than most individual species possessed in their entire military. It was enough firepower to conquer several star systems or defend against a major invasion. But the humans were not moving toward anyone else's territory. They were consolidating their forces within their own borders. The mollusk representative had turned a sickly green color as he processed this information. If the humans have that many warships, why did they only send a small fleet against the Kethvar? He asked. Because they did not need more ships to win, replied Agent Korthak grimly. Our analysis suggests that the human fleet that destroyed the Kethvar Armada represented less than 5% of their total military capability. The silence that followed was deafening. The alien delegates stared at each other with growing horror as the implications became clear. The humans had not used their full strength against the Kethvar. They had sent what amounted to a patrol force and completely annihilated the most feared military power in the galaxy. What does this mean for us? Asked the Aquatic Federation representative, her gills fluttering with anxiety. It means we have made a terrible mistake, replied Speaker Vorthak, his voice barely above a whisper. Over the next several days, the reports continued to pour in. Human diplomats were politely but firmly closing embassies and consulates. Human traders were completing their final transactions, and departing human tourists were cutting short their vacations and heading home. It was the most organized and thorough withdrawal from galactic civilization that anyone had ever witnessed. But what terrified the council members most was not what the humans were doing, but how they were doing it. There was no anger, no threats, no demands for apologies. The humans were simply leaving as if the rest of the galaxy no longer existed for them. Representative Zelia had spent days trying to contact human officials through back channels, hoping to negotiate some kind of compromise. Every attempt was met with the same polite response. The United Earth government appreciated the Council's concern, but had no further business to discuss with alien species. The humans are treating us like we are irrelevant, the Zephyrian delegate reported to the Council, her light form dim with worry. They are not acting like a species that feels threatened. They are acting like a species that has lost interest in us entirely, as the final human vessels disappeared beyond the edges of known space. The Council found itself facing a terrifying new reality. They had assumed that their combined military might make them invincible. They had believed that no single species could challenge their authority. They had thought that the threat of destruction would force any rational government to submit. Instead, they had driven away the one species that might have been powerful enough to be their equal. The humans had not begged for mercy or tried to negotiate better terms. They had simply chosen to go their own way, taking with them technology and capabilities that the galaxy was only beginning to understand. Intelligence reports from the outer rim painted an even more disturbing picture. Human colonies were expanding rapidly in directions that led away from council space. New human settlements were appearing on worlds that had been considered uninhabitable by other species. Human exploration fleets were pushing into regions of space that no other species had ever successfully explored. The humans were not just leaving galactic civilization. They were creating their own civilization in parts of the galaxy that the Council could not reach or control. Agent Korthak delivered the final blow to Council confidence during a closed session. 1 week after Hyunwoo's departure, our deep space monitoring stations have detected human ships moving beyond the galactic rim, he reported. They appear to be establishing bases in the void between galaxies. The implications were staggering. The humans were not just independent of Council authority. They were becoming completely unreachable. The same species that had effortlessly destroyed the Kethvar Armada was now expanding into regions of space where no Council fleet could follow. Speaker Vorthak stared at the holographic display showing the last known positions of human vessels. The dots of light were scattered across the galaxy like seeds that had been planted too far apart to control. As he watched, even those signals faded and disappeared, leaving no trace of human presence in Council-monitored space. "What have we done?" he asked the empty air around him. But there was no answer, only the growing realization that the Council had made an enemy out of the one species they should have tried to make into an ally. The humans were gone, and the galaxy would never be the same.